The person who is entirely focused on the summit doesn't often make it to the summit. The person who finds to enjoy every step, every conversation, every lichen, every view, if they focus on that, they get to the summit.
I'd like to welcome to the show, Eric Edmeades. How you doing, Eric?
Good. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much for being on the show, my friend. I've been a fan of yours for quite some time. I first saw you, I think, at Mind Valley at one of the events a few years ago, prior to the world coming to an insane, the insane place that we are right now. Back when we could like just talk without a mask on and things like that, all those years ago. And I just
would you be more comfortable if I wore a mask now?
I mean, if you could, that would be fantastic. I mean, I didn't want to say anything because could you imagine? Could you imagine if Zoom, you could get something, would be over. The whole thing would be done. But I really wanted to have you on the show because you are, I mean, there used to be those old Tres Equis commercials of the most interesting man in the world. You, sir, are one of the most interesting men I've ever seen. And I work in Hollywood. So I've met a lot of interesting folks in my day. And you, my friend, you have a heck of a story. So that's why I wanted to have you on the show and see and kind of do a deep dive on how your journey has affected your own personal journey, how you affect other people, and so on. So I wanted to kind of take it back because I was reading in your bio that you were when you were a young man, you were homeless for a little bit. Can you discuss a little bit, if you don't mind, discuss a little bit about that time and what that did to affect you and what you do? And if you wanted to stay before that, who you are, what you do for the audience, so they know kind of, because you do so much, it's hard to give you an introduction, what you do before, and then that time in your early childhood.
Yeah, no problem. My background, I mean, the simple short version is I was born in South Africa. We immigrated to Canada when I was a small child. And I went through, some of the typical childhood divorce and some non-idyllic, growing up situations. And then eventually I kind of just got to a place where it was like up to me. And I'll come back to that relative to the homelessness thing. But I got to a place where my health and safety and survival and stuff was ultimately going to be up to me. And where that's taken me to is that I have had a really interesting life, but I have to remind you, interesting, there's that old Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. It's a two-edged sword. Let's remember that part, right?
Exactly.
But I got involved in business when I was young. I started my first company when I was 27 and I sold it 9 years later in the mobile computing field. And then I then spent 2 years just traveling around the world, learning and exploring and such. And then I bought a film studio in Northern California and worked in the film industry for a number of years. We worked on, I got to work on Avatar and Pirates of the Caribbean and Iron Man and some really cool stuff. And I've had an eclectic business background. We sort of parlayed our Hollywood special effects tech into like world-class military simulation stuff and developed life-saving technology for the U.S. Army and first responders that went on to the products that went on to win awards from the U.S. Army and from Congress. So it was really an interesting journey. And then about 10 years ago, I made the decision to follow my real dream, which was always to get involved in teaching. And so that's mostly what I do these days. But going back to the moment when you would never have been able to predict any of these things is that at 15 years old, I had a pretty big dispute with my father. My father had been recently sober. And one thing I've really realized about alcoholism, and my dad is not secretive about this. He tells everybody, so I'm not breaking his anonymity. But one of the things that's really tricky about alcoholism is that when you sober up, it's like almost like you're reborn. You have to start all over again. And so my dad, at the point in time I went to go live with him, was basically like a 3-year-old adult. He was starting, and that made, I wasn't the ideal teenager by far, and he wasn't the ideal parent by far. And one thing led to another, and he kicked me out of the house. And so I found myself in Edmonton, Alberta, literally homeless. Now, in retrospect, having obviously spoken to him, he and I are very good friends. it was not his intention to kick me out. It was his intention to stimulate me to do what he wanted me to do. And I refused to do that. So I left. So from his side, I left. From my side, he kicked me out. But the net result is that it was Edmonton, Alberta, and it was January, which means minus 30. And I had to figure out life. I had to figure out how to get food. I had to figure out how to not freeze to death and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I will say this about that time in my life. I have no regret about it at all. In fact, one of the things I'm quite grateful for is that it wasn't summer. You know, everybody's asking for their life to be easier, right? Like, I want my life to be easier. I like what Jim Rohn used to say about things. Don't ask for life to be easier. Ask for you to be stronger. You know, so think about it. If life had been easier, if I'd been homeless, say June, then that first night, it would have been very easy for me to go down to the high level park, find a park bench and find somewhere to sleep because it was warm. It would have been easy. I had run away times before and slept out overnight. So I knew how to do that. And if it was June, I might've done that. But after about 3 days of doing that, I would have started looking like a homeless kid. And then I would have started smelling like one. And then I would have been like, you know, I wouldn't have had any impetus, any immediate threat to me. And so I could have just drifted into this comfortable summer homelessness like you see in Southern California so very often, even in Northern California, although it's very different by the time December comes along, right? Things change. So what happened in December, because this happened in January for me, I would quite literally frozen to death if I didn't find a solution. And I found a variety. I tried couch surfing for a while, as anybody would, but you can only surf couches at your teenage friends' houses for so long before the parents are like, "Do your parents know you're here?" You know, it's tricky. Mm-hmm. And then at one point, I still had a key to my dad's building, so I would like sneak in. And we lived in a 28-story building, or he did now. And I would sneak in and go up to like the top floor and sleep at the 28th floor stairwell. You know, that was a safe place because nobody uses the stairs at that, so nobody's going to catch me. But, you know, where I changed everything was we hung out at video arcades back then, you know, arcade games where you had to put the money in. How traumatic would that be for kids today? You have to put money in.
They have no idea what to do. My children, my children with the card now, they swipe and the card doesn't work anymore because you're out of money.
Yeah. We had to actually count our quarters, right? You know?
Yes.
But so we hung out at this video arcade, and the guy who owned it, he was a friend of mine's father. And I walked up to him one day and I said, you know, geez, you look tired. Now you have to think I'm 15 years old. I probably look 12. And how impetuous is this, you know, to walk up to an adult and say, hey, you look tired. But he's like, I am tired. And I go, I think I know why. And he goes, why? And I go, well, you're here late closing every night. And then you're here opening for us all first thing in the morning. And that's just got to be tough on you. And he goes, I'm not hiring. I said, I'm not asking you to. I have a proposal for you. And he goes, what? And I said, well, I will open the place for you. I'm not hiring. And he goes, just wait. I said, I will open the place for you in the mornings and I'll cover the first 3 hours of the day. And then I will come in at night and I will close the place up for you. So, you know, from 10 till midnight so you can go. And he's like, I'm not hiring. And I go, I'll do it for free. All you got to do is let me sleep on this couch at night. And since he had no problem violating child labor laws, he said yes. And so, you know, now I got myself off the street and effectively got myself a job, because the truth was he also knew I had no money and I wasn't eating. So then he started buying me meals and we worked out a really good deal. It worked out really well for him and it worked out really well for me until I was able to get myself back into school. And that was, you know, it took several months. And I would say that experience was unbelievably defining for me because, you know, I think it put me in a place where I knew you could drop me pretty much in any city in the world and I'd figure it out. And I knew that from 15.
Isn't it funny that we look back on our toughest times and at the moment you go, oh God, why am I going through this? This shouldn't be the thing. And in hindsight, you go back and go, yeah, it's the best thing that could have ever happened to me. Didn't you come up with, I think I saw a video, the hindsight window.
That's right.
What is the hindsight window?
Well, the hindsight window is the period of time between an event that you regard as an adverse event and the eventual time later when you are able to look back at that event with minimally appreciation and maybe even gratitude. And that period of time is the hindsight window. And you know, so what that means is you get fired, you're angry, you're resentful, you don't like it, and you're blaming and you're blaming and you're blaming. And then 3 years later, you look at your life and go, holy crap, thank God I got fired. Boom, window closed. But the challenge is that the longer the window remains open, the harder happiness is to attain. The more windows you have open at any point sequentially in your life, the more difficult happiness is to attain. And that's because of this principle. If the road has been bumpy so far, it will be bumpy in the future. And that's how people think. They go, if the road's been bumpy so far, then it will be bumpy in the future. And I'm like, well, yeah, but what if you drive a Jeep? Then if the road has been bumpy so far, then the road will be bumpy in the future. And so there's a perspective shift at the way we look at our lives. And so what I aim to do with people is help them to close those windows more rapidly. The talk you're referring to was first delivered at Mind Valley, and then Goldcast picked it up. And I've been really lucky. Millions of people have seen it. It's really cool. But the core message of it is that if you're in an event and somebody goes, oh, one day we're going to look back at this and laugh. Well, if we're going to laugh one day, we may as well do that now. We may as well find a way to find the appreciation of this. And here's kind of my joke about that. Imagine somebody does get fired, right? So one reaction is, you're fired. Oh, man, that's just not fair. This always happens to me. And then you go tell your friends how unreasonable your boss was, and you have all that going on, right? Mm-hmm. What about this getting fired? You're fired. Thank God. I mean, thank you. Look, you and I both know this day was coming. We just didn't know who was going to do it first, you or me. And thank God you had the guts to do it, because I certainly didn't. I appreciate this. I know that I've been under par, and I needed this kick in the pants to turn things around for myself. Thank you for firing me. I am so grateful. Now, I want to tell you something. First of all, you pull that, they're going to unfire you. Easily.
You're absolutely right.
Maybe we made a mistake here.
You're way too self-aware.
Even if they don't. What's that?
You're way too self-aware. We need to have you here.
Yeah, no. Yeah. Now you've learned the lesson. You can stay. But even if they don't do that, which maybe they won't. But the point is that think about how different it is to go job searching when you have a complete attitude of gratitude about losing the last job, rather than a choice of victimization. If you feel like you were victimized over there, then you're expecting to be victimized over here. Guess what you're going to attract? You're going to attract it. It's going to happen again. So closing the hindsight window is one of the very best steps that anyone can take for their mental health. And I put it this way: the more resentment and anger and regret that you have about your past, the more anxiety you will have about your future. On the other hand, the more appreciation and gratitude you have for everything that's happened in your past, the more faith you will approach the future with, and maybe even excitement. And so that is really the hindsight window in a nutshell.
That's a fact. I mean, it's so true. I mean, I got fired from one of the highest paying jobs I ever had in my life, and it was miserable. And then I got fired. It was like a complete hatchet job, and HR, and they just wanted me out because I was the highest paid editor at that station. And then 3 days later, I got another job, and 2 months later, I opened up my post house. So it's just like exactly the way. And then I went off from there, and had my own post house up until I retired from the film industry, or not the film industry, from post production about 4 years ago, when I became a podcaster, a professional.
Now you do pre, post, and everything production.
Exactly. But it's so weird how your journey keeps nudging you in. And I talk a lot about this on the show. It's like, I feel that we're all born with a certain set of skills. We're programmed at the factory with certain things. You and I probably won't play in the NBA. It's probably not in our bucket of tools that we're going to be able to do, especially not at our age at this point. Maybe we had a shot a few years ago, but not now. But we are born with certain things. And as long as we keep going towards the path that makes sense for the tools that we have been given, life is a little easier. Doors open a little bit for it. But when we go off road a little bit, it's when the universe starts to nudge you. And then if you don't listen, it'll push you. And if you don't listen, then a sledgehammer comes out. And that's when something really crazy happens that needs to kind of blow up your life, to really wake you up and get you back on the right path. Is that your experience as well?
Yeah, I really think so. It's very much about watching, patterns. And I do feel like the unlearned lesson is the repeated lesson. And so if you go through something and let's say getting fired and you approach it with blame and you approach it with all this kind of, difficulty, then you will have that vibration. You will walk into the next job interview and you will align. I mean, if you think in pure physics, right, you strike a tuning fork over here, then this tuning fork will, if it's the same frequency, it will vibrate. It's called resonance. And when we vibrate, when we have resonance with something, we feel attracted to it. Well, hold on a minute. What is your vibration when you're in victim mode, having been fired? Victim vibration. Then you go to a job interview and you go to a place that victimizes people. You have resonance. So now you're going to have another job and get victimized again. Now you're going to be ringing even louder when you get fired from that job or you quit that job, and you're going to be resonating this victim thing even further. And then you're going to go to the next job and the next job. And it isn't until one day when you close the window on all these things and say, wait a minute now, what did I really need to learn from this? And then you change your vibration, you go to the next job interview and you can sense that it's a victim culture. You can sense that they are unfair. And you're like, no, I'm not a match for this anymore. So that you're right. The universe comes along with, knocking on the door going, hey, I want you to learn something about this. Don't be such a victim. Hello, you want to not do this. And then you're right. If you don't, it'll just keep happening until one day it's, in a sense, life breaking. And what I would suggest is that sometimes we need to hit rock bottom to make change. But the good news is that we can project our consciousness out to rock bottom before our body gets there. And we can learn the lesson that way.
That's very interesting. I've never heard the term, the tuning fork idea of vibration, because it's so true. I mean, I've heard the concepts of, attracts like, and if you want to put, if you want good things to happen, you put good energy, and depending on your mindset, you'll attract whatever's in your mind, and so on and so forth. But I never looked at it from a scientific perspective, which is a tuning fork, where if a vibration of something or a frequency will attract that same frequency. And if you walk into a room that doesn't make sense to you, or into a situation that doesn't feel right, that's the vibrations are not connecting. So, for some people, will walk into a room with a bunch of gangsters. If you're a gangster, you'd be like, hey, what's up? But if you're not a gangster and you walk in there and you're like, with no one ever saying it a word, you feel this is not the right place for me. It's so very true. I never thought about it that way.
What's also important about that is you walk into that room with the gangsters, and okay, so you're not going to have a resonance match with them, but you also don't want to walk in there feeling terrified and afraid, because they're going to see that. One of the biggest lessons I got in all of this, closing hindsight windows, understanding resonance, was many years ago, reading a story about two women who'd both been sexually assaulted in Central Park. And it was such a difficult story to read about. And, they both went through a very similar situation, but they ended up responding to it very differently. They both came away thinking, I never want this to happen to me again. Of course. I mean, of course they're going to think that. And they both learned, as a result of what happened to them, that the odds of it happening to you a second time are higher after it's happened once. So this is an interesting lesson in resonance. So what happens is a woman goes through this experience, and then she's got this nervousness in her, and she's afraid, and she walks on the street. Well, the kind of men who commit these crimes are spineless wimps who pick on victims. So somebody who's walking along with a victim vibration is like the perfect candidate for them. That's who so now this woman puts herself, weirdly, she's in this place of, now I'm even more likely. So both women learned this. The one woman dealt with it by never going outside, becoming agoraphobic, drugs, prescription medication, therapy, a few suicide attempts, it ruined her life. But the other woman learned this information and understood this thing about resonance and said, I never want this to happen to me again, but I'm going to have to do something different. And what her decision was, is she went off to learn a self-defense class, and she learned some basic things like a credit card held in the hand the right way can actually cut open a throat. It's a weird thing to know, but it can happen. And so she would now, or keys, put the keys between your fingers when you're walking down the street. And I'm a big fan of the book. What is the book? It's When Violence is the Only Answer. The author's slipping my mind at the moment. I met him some time ago. Great book. He says violence is only ever the answer when violence is the only answer. So I'm not advocating for violence. I'm just saying this woman went and learned how to defend herself. Then what happened is she would go for dinner with her friends in New York somewhere, and then she'd like me to walk to her car, and they would be like, "Oh, do you need us to walk you to your car? After what happened." And she would look at them and go, no, I'm all right. And then she would walk down the street, but her vibration was not, don't hurt me. Her vibration was, go ahead and make my freaking day. Because she had learned how to, and you know what? The kind of men who commit those crimes are, they're
terrified of that kind of energy.
Yeah, they're chickens. They're ultimately want to pick on the weak. So they don't. And so then what happened is her friends started asking her, and then she started her own classes, and then that got franchised, and she ended up with a chain of self-defense stores for women. And in the interview, they asked her, like, if you could go in a time machine and prevent your own rape, would you do so?
Ooh.
She said no.
That's powerful.
And I'm like, okay, I cannot relate to that. Like I consider myself medium stoic and fairly tough at times, but I can't relate to that. But then she explained it. She goes, look, I am more afraid of the woman I was before that happened than I am of the one that I am today. That the life of me before is what I'm afraid of. The life of living in fear, that's what I'm afraid of. And plus, on top of that, if I get out of the selfishness of it, think of all the hundreds of women that I have now helped to also not live in fear. So no, I can't go back and undo what happened to me. That is a hindsight window firmly closed.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. It's really amazing. Now, I did hear you once talk about your time with Mr. Tony Robbins. I saw that whole talk, which is fantastic. Can you tell the people, because this is such a fascinating story, how did you end up on stage with one of the greatest public speakers of his generation, and how were you able to just get there, not even planned?
You know, I don't know if I have that kind of time, but I'll do the best that I can.
The short version.
I made the decision to become a speaker. I made the decision to become a teacher, and I went through like an ideation process, and I effectively said, well, if I wanted to accelerate, it would be really useful for me to work with some of the top people in the field. So I wrote on a board, Tony Robbins, Harv Eker, Jack Canfield. It's a longer, funnier story how those names ended up on the board, but I wrote them on there with no sense of belief. There was no sense of belief about that. But what I will tell you is that within about 6 or 8 months of writing their name on the board, I became very good friends with Jack Canfield. He is a very good friend of mine. We're members of a private mastermind together. I see him until the pandemic, like twice a year, minimally. And then weirdly, I bumped into Harv Eker at the grocery store in Turks and Caicos, where I was living at the time. And this is an important thing to understand about vibration and resonance, is that when you live in a place like Turks and Caicos, you don't see tourists, you don't even see them. And he was a tourist, but he was dressed like a tourist, shopping like a tourist. You don't even see tourists. Like they're just, but because I'd written his name on the board, I saw him. And more than that, because I'd written his name on the board, I talked to him. I went up and I go, hey, Harv, my name's Eric Edmeades. Weird thing. I wrote your name on the board. We got to talk. And I ended up having a barbecue at his house that night. And he lived just down the road from me. And he, at that point, it was not common knowledge at the time, but he was thinking of selling a seminar company. And he offered it to me. Like he said, well, you've sold your business. Why don't you buy my set? I could have instantly owned the largest training company in the world if I wanted to shortcut my speaking career pretty quickly. In the end, I didn't do that. But the reason I mention all this is that you asked how I did it. I didn't do it. The universe did it. I set an intention and the universe followed. I did not create Jack Canfield coming into my life the way he did and joining his mastermind. And it's not a mastermind you join and pay a membership fee. And no, this is a private invite only. John Gray, Jack Canfield, Marianne Williamson, the entire cast of The Secret, pretty much. And it's really neat. What happened with Tony was my very good friend Chet Holmes was a good friend of Tony's, and Chet was scheduled to teach marketing at an event. And unfortunately, Chet had been fighting cancer, and it really looked like he was going to win. And he was booked to speak at an event. And I was flying home, and I on the plane realized I hadn't spoken to him in about 10 days. So I wrote him an email, and then I landed at Newark Airport and got into the lounge and immediately got a note from his cousin, Brian, that he had passed away in the night, pretty much at the moment that I wrote the email to him. Like it was, and then I arrived home and I got this phone call, and the phone call is, look, Chet's passed away. And Chet always spoke highly of you. We've never seen you speak. I wasn't the speaker, so I don't know what they were thinking, but Chet always spoke highly of you. Would you come and speak at this event? Tony really wants you to come. And I'm like, okay, if I even believe you about this, because honestly, I thought it was a April Fool's joke of some kind. I just it was so outside my frame of possibility that I didn't believe him. But I then realized that he was telling me, I said, okay, I think I believe you now, but here's what I believe. What I believe is that Chet can't make it. You've called every other speaker that you would normally call, but it's 11 days notice and none of them can do it. So you're calling me as your last ditch offer. You even asked the crazy dude on the street corner who talks about Jesus. You asked him first. Now you're talking to me and you're hoping I'll say yes. And if I say yes, you will beg Tony to let me do it. And there's silence. And he goes, yeah, but I can convince him. And so I told him to give me an hour.
That's amazing.
I told him to give me an hour and I waited the hour and I called him at the 59-minute mark and I said, okay, I'll do it. And in the meantime, he had convinced Tony, and 11 days later, I got off to Fiji. And this is where it's kind of interesting is I had been to some of Tony's seminar. I've been listening to Tony on CDs and on tapes.
Oh, tapes. Yeah, I did tapes and CDs. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I knew his material quite well. And I was a fan, and I got there and Tony didn't know anything about me. And his team comes to get me and go, hey, Eric, Tony wants to have a word with you in the hallway, but he's not going to introduce you at the event. And it's only me and him at this event. It's a 5-day business event. And he and I are the only 2 speakers. And so he's like, he's not going to introduce you. The translator is going to introduce you, but he wants to meet you anyway. So I go out in the hallway and Tony's like, so how are you feeling about your presentation? And I'm like, well, 11
Great
days
impression.
notice.
Great impression, by the way.
He's like, I 11 days notice, and you want me to use Chet's slides in his presentation. I said, it could be better. And he's like, well, you could be a lot more confident. And at this point, I'm like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. He's not going to let me. But then I remember what Tony said about rapport, right? With rapport, you don't meet somebody else's high energy with low. Nobody in the history of calming down has ever calmed down because somebody told them to calm down, right? So I'm not going to, Tony, take it easy. No. So you could be a lot more confident. I go, Tony, I'm plenty confident. I said, the reason I'm here and all your other speakers aren't here is because they're business operators. I'm a business owner. I can be here. The talk might not be everything you're expecting, but I bet you it's going to be fantastic anyway. And he goes, oh, well, all right then. and then it gets kind of funny. And this is a little crazy, but he changes his mind and decides that he will introduce me because he liked me. And he's like, I want to introduce this guy personally. So where it gets a bit crazy is that I was going to be introduced by the Chinese translator. So they'd taken my bio and they'd put it into Chinese, and then they'd thrown away the English one. And then Tony's like, well, where's Eric's bio? I want to introduce him. And well, we threw out the English one. Well, translate it back. So the short version of this is that the bio, I wasn't even a speaker. So the bio wasn't even all that well written. It basically said, look, Eric's not really a speaker. He's really just a traditional business guy. He started his first business and sold it 9 years later, blah, 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 blah. That's what it said. Started his business, sold it 9 years later. Tony gets up on stage and he says, you guys, I'm so excited to introduce this next speaker. I was just talking to him in the hallway. I can't wait to hear what he's got to say to you guys. He started his first business when he was only 9 years old. So anyway, the talk went well, and he and I hit it off, and and then he booked me to tour with him for about 1.5 years teaching marketing and business and stuff. And it's really, I'm here with you now because Tony created that space for me.
Now, what was, spending all that time with Tony, what was the biggest lesson you took away from him?
Biggest lesson, they're all contextual. I was having lunch with him. We were in Fiji, and I was having lunch with him at his house in Fiji. And it was like the day after my talk. And I thought we'd have like a 15-minute lunch, but we had a 4-hour lunch. And it was he and Sage and my wife at the time, and we were sitting there. And Tony was being effusive about my talk. He was like, I love the way you did this. And then when you transition like that, and the way you tell the stories, and you're using the whole stage. And he's just going on and on and on like this. And it went on for like 30 minutes. Like I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't, I was full. And I said, Tony, you can have no idea how much this means to me to hear that. And I appreciate it. I said, but what I'm really curious about is how can I make it even better? And his eyes were like, and he grabbed my journal and he just, and I think one of the big lessons I got from there is that, ask for help. Ask for help. Tony really gave me a great deal of personal attention and personal help during that time. I don't know how many people, there's not many people who've had personal speaking training from Tony. He doesn't do that. And it's because I It's because I asked. And I think that's a big lesson. I still need to learn that lesson from time to time. I'm getting better at it, but that year with him really did show me that.
Eric, I mean, it seems like you've done so many things in life. I have to believe at a certain point you were afraid. You had to break through some
All the time.
barrier. Yeah, how to break through some barriers. What advice do you have for people who are facing that fear every day in either big things or even just little things? And how can you, do you have any techniques? Do you have any advice?
So I've just put the finishing touches on a book that deals with this topic quite handily. The truth is that today, most of us have nothing to be afraid of, really. That's the truth. I mean, okay, of course there are exceptions. If you're in the wrong neighborhood, you're in the Ukraine, like, there are exceptions. But for most of us, there is actually nothing for us to be afraid of. And I mean this literally. Like, I've spent a great deal of time with hunter-gatherer communities and watched the way they live day by day. And they live with like genuine things, like there are snakes and spiders and lions and rhinos and elephants and danger and no houses and no food storage. Like they live in a constant knife-edge survival routine. And why that's important to know is that that's how our ancestors lived for 99% of our history. And so that means that our neurotransmitters evolved for a harsher environment. Our neurotransmitters evolved for needing to survive really difficult conditions. And so the trouble we have today is that we use those same neurotransmitters to communicate about our lives today. Here's an example. You're walking along, I'm walking along. I walk down a riverbank and I walk down into a dry riverbed in the low veld in Africa, and there's 14 lions under the tree. And I'm not, this actually happened to me. This is a literal story. And there are 14 lions under the tree. Well, what happens at that moment is your brain immediately goes to fight or flight, right? Immediately you start pumping adrenaline, you start pumping cortisol. Cortisol is designed to do many things, but one of the things that it does is that it slows your blood down and actually begins preparing you for coagulation so that if you do get an injury, you don't bleed out. At the same time, adrenaline is increasing the strength to your muscles and your heart. And then at the same time, you are losing logic, because you only need the most basic logic in a situation like this: fast, slow, throw, run. You don't need, you're not sitting there thinking about the interpride dynamics of the lions, right? Your logic is gone. And then you also begin to lose your connection with empathy. The more afraid you are, the less empathy you have. And this is a full extreme. When somebody is at their most expansive, they want to save the planet. When somebody is at their most expansive, they want to save the larger community around them. Then if things get a little more tense, they want to save their neighborhood. Then if things get really tense, they want to save their house. And then sadly, if things get scary enough, they start choosing which family members to save. I know this sounds harsh, but the truth is, if you have somebody drowning in the water, the ultimate fear, death, is coming, and the person they love the most in the world gets in the water with them, they will drown that person. They won't want to. It's not logical. It's just that the more afraid you are, the less empathy you have. Now, all of that works just fine if you're there with the lions. That's what it's for, right? That's what it's meant for. But how helpful is that when the police pull you over? Right. You're driving along and you see the red and blues in your back window. You start pumping adrenaline. You start pumping cortisol. You start losing your sense of logic. You start losing your sense of empathy, which means you can't empathize with the policeman. The policeman comes to your door. You look nervous. You can't say what you want to say properly. You stumble on your words. Now you create a sense of suspicion in that policeman. That policeman starts acting like you're suspicious. You feel more suspicious, and it's a horrible feedback loop. Another example might be you get a legal summons in the mail. Well, you get a legal summons in the mail. You look at it. The return address is a lawyer. You haven't even opened the envelope yet. You just know that it's a legal summons. You start producing adrenaline. You start producing a cortisol. All wonderful if you're about to get a serious paper cut, but not useful otherwise. And so what happens is you read the legal summons through your fear. The more fearful you are, the more negative the world looks. Now, the worst thing you could do is respond to the lawyer from that position. So what I want to say is, you say that I must have faced fear. Yeah, all the time. I mean, literally all the time. If you're not doing stuff that you're afraid of, you're just not living. It's just, if you're not asking that person out on a date because you're afraid, you're not living. If you're not starting that business because you're afraid, you're not living. If you're not tell you what, anybody who has children, they don't have a little fear of that. in denial. It's scary.
Yeah, I have
right?
children.
So there you go. The best things in life are on the other side of fear. So the issue is not how to get rid of it. The issue is to recognize that it is a opportunity for upgrade. Look, this is a silly metaphor. It is, but I'm going to use it anyway. When a video gamer gets to the big boss or gets to the next level, or it doesn't matter if you're playing Super Mario or Call of Duty, there are these moments where this game suddenly becomes more intense. Suddenly it gets tougher. And if you can get through that stage, then you get all the power-ups and all the bonus points, and you get to go to the next level. And video gamers come up to that stage and they don't go, oh, I don't think I'll play this part. They buckle in. They're ready. Game on. Because they know that all of the benefits and the rewards are on the other side of this challenge. Well, guess what? It's the same thing with life. It's the exact same thing. You walk into an office and the guy says, you're fired. You should realize you're up against the big boss. You're up against one of those levels. If you handle this badly, you're just going to have to play the level again. That's how the game works. If you handle it badly, you're going to have to play the level again. But if you step up and go game on, then you get to go through that level.
That's excellent answer, sir, to that question. And I was a gamer, but I was an old school Nintendo gamer, sir. So original old school OG, if you will.
Super Mario, man. Not even Mario Kart, I bet.
No, just straight up. Come on, Contra, up, down, left, right. Come on. So with all of this, your life being what it is, how has this life's journey affected your spiritual journey? Because I know you're a spiritual man as well. How has that affected, seeing as many things as you've seen, being around the world, meeting so many different kinds of people, experiences you've had? How's that affected your spiritual journey?
Life is suffering, right? Sort of.
That's what Buddha said.
Buddhist idea is life is suffering. I feel that it's a bit like this. Everybody's out there trying to find their purpose in life. And I think that your purpose in life is rather more simple than that. Your purpose in life is to enjoy the journey as much as possible. We spend a huge amount of our time sacrificing our enjoyment, sacrificing our time, sacrificing our health, sacrificing our time with our family. We spend a huge amount of our time sacrificing and doing things that we don't want to do in order to earn money to maybe one day get to do something that we want to do. And for a lot of people, that means working at a dreary job for 50 weeks of the year and with the odd vacation and taking their 2 weeks off on vacation. Much of our life is built that way. And my feeling is that people's purpose in life is very simple. It is to enjoy it as much as possible. Years and years ago, over 20 years ago, I published a magazine online. It was the very first internet e-zine, like the first success-based e-zine. It was called the Success Express Journal. I started publishing in 1994. And I wrote in there one day, because all these people are like trying to define success. How do you define success? And everybody has their own version. But I feel quite strongly that that success in life itself is defined by the number of days that you enjoyed, the number of days that you actually were happy. And so what that says to me is, and if people take that badly, it means they think that it means that they're supposed to work really hard to create these happy days. And I'm like, no. What it means is that there are some days that are going to be naturally rewarding and easily pleasurable. And there are some days that are going to be significantly more challenging and uncomfortable. And if you really want to magnify your life experience, you will find a way to enjoy both. You will find a way to appreciate both. You will find a way to not simply appreciate the obvious rewards, the yummy food, the nice vacation, the amazing sex, the great concert, the wonderful whatever. You can enjoy that stuff. It doesn't take any skills to enjoy that. It takes real skill to enjoy climbing Kilimanjaro. It takes real skill to enjoy running a marathon. It takes real skill to enjoy. And listen, people know this on a level. They just don't understand it yet often. And I'll prove it to you. What kind of music do people listen to when they've just gone through a terrible, heart-wrenching, heart ripped out of their chest breakup? They listen to Alanis Morissette. Now, first album, yes. That's it. They're listening to it. It's your fault. I'm in this pain. But here's the thing: why are they listening to that? Or what's her name? Kelly Clarkson. Because of you, I'm enjoying my pain and misery so much at this moment. The truth is that when somebody is in that despair and in that pain and misery, the best thing they can do is put on the saddest songs ever and feel it fully and recognize that that is the texture of life. That one day, if you ever achieve the singularity, whether it's because somebody figures it out with technology or because that's what the spiritual plane is, who knows? But it strikes me that if we do move into this infinite space, out in that infinite space, there's no mystery, there's no fear, there's no regret. Maybe there's no feelings, maybe there's no emotions, maybe it's just thought. And I got to tell you, if you ever transition into just thought, just spiritual existence or just uploaded existence, I am telling you right now, you and I are two, singularity being selves. We're going to turn to each other and go, you know what? I miss some stuff, don't you? What do you miss? And you're going to be like, well, I miss pizza. And I'm like, yeah, I miss pizza. And you know what else? I miss orgasms and I miss music. And you know what I also miss? I hate admitting this to you, but I miss heartbreak. I miss despair. I miss feeling. Look, here's the real proof. The life lived between the margins is unremembered. If you don't have an emotional response, you will not remember what happened.
Correct.
But if you have an emotional response, you activate your memory. And that emotional response can be positive and it activates your memory, or it can be less than comfortable. It activates the memory. And I think that your purpose in life is to generate memories. So that's it. Look, one more thing. And I know this doesn't sound like the most spiritual thing. It's not really, but I guess my view of it is that we have to walk this line between don't take life too seriously and take it bloody seriously. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is that don't take the individual parts of life, the individual aspects of life so very seriously that they can mess you up. But then at the same time, recognize that you get this one life, you get this one body, you get this one experience. No matter, you believe in heaven, you believe in reincarnation, you believe in the singularity. Sure, there might be something after. But as it stands right now, it appears that we only get to remember this one. Mm-hmm. So
make it memorable.
Make it memorable and have as much fun with it as you can.
With all the things that you do in life, I got to believe there's some stress every once in a while. How do you deal? How do you deal with stress? Do you meditate? Do you what is it that you do to bring down the stress or handle stressful situations when they come towards you?
I have two approaches. Well, I have three approaches to stress. One is my dysfunctional approach. And what I mean by that is that occasionally I let it get to me and I observe that and watch it and try to learn from it. And my experience is that when that does happen, it's because there's an unlearned lesson. If there's an unlearned lesson, if I can just go to the root cause and find the lesson, then I will release. But otherwise, my more functional ways of dealing with stress, one is to use stress. Stress is not a bad thing. When I do public speaking, for example, I'm not scared, I'm not nervous, but I do feel some stress. It's called excitement. I feel there's stress in that. And so certain types of stresses are helpful and they're useful and they help to build your resilience and your strength and prepare you for what's coming. But then the other side is what I don't like, what I don't agree with, what I don't think we should live with is pervasive, ever-present stress. That's dangerous. That'll shorten your life. That'll shorten your quality of life. It's not ideal. And so there are a number of different things that I would suggest are great strategies to deal with that. But I will tell you what isn't a great idea. Psychotropic pills, like going to see your pharmaceutical psychiatrist and having a conversation with them about what pill can help you to feel better. That is never a good idea. My rough idea about this is that out of every 10,000 behavior modifying drugs that are prescribed to somebody to help them, maybe one of them was actually medically necessary and the rest are not. That is not how to deal with these problems. And if they are necessary, then we should only regard them as a crutch for a short time until we heal, not as a chronic treatment for a long term. And unfortunately, that's how many of them are these days. What we have noticed, one of my companies, WildFit, does nutritional coaching for people. So we help people rebalance their relationship with food. And what was amazing about this is we knew when we did this that we would help people lose weight. We knew that we would help people reduce inflammation. And we had a theory, which has now been proven out, that we would help people reverse type 2 diabetes and that kind of stuff. But what we didn't know was that countless clients of ours would tell us that they had ended their medications. Now, hold on. We knew that they would end their blood pressure medications. We suspected strongly that they would end or reduce their thyroid medications and their diabetes medications. We knew all that was on the table, but it never occurred to me that they would be ending their antidepressant use. that they would no longer be depressed, that they would be happy. We've had people come to us and say, like, I've been suicidal for years and suddenly I'm not. And all we've done with them, all we've done is help them have a better relationship with food, water, movement, exercise, sunlight, what have you. If you give the body what it needs, the body responds better to everything. That's it. I don't believe a single person should be going to see a psychiatrist until first they fix their diet. If you really handle your nutritional needs, your hydration needs, your sunlight needs, you do that stuff properly, 99% of what we consider to be stress and psychological problems, anxiety, and all that kind of stuff goes away. So there's that. Then the next thing is yes, meditation, journaling, contemplation. These things are really important. One of the things that we've lost is thinking time. Yeah, I see a little gray in there, so I figure you and I can't be so far apart in age.
We're similar vintage, sir.
There you go, similar vintage. So that means that you remember what life was like when we could think, when we used to be forced to think, when you were sitting at the doctor's office and all the magazines he had there were 8 years old, and they were the wrong magazines.
It was highlight.
There you go. So you just had to sit there. You might be old enough to remember what TVs, what planes were like when they didn't have TVs and nobody had an iPad. You just sat there and thought. You stuck in traffic. You just sat there and thought. Like we used to do a lot of thinking, but now we acquiesce our thinking to our devices. And we are constantly having our brain stimulated by our devices. And so when we do that, we're messing up our serotonin and dopamine production, because guess what? Facebook and Instagram know that if they trigger your serotonin and dopamine, they can addict you, and then you can't help but pick up your device. So, basically they're drug dealers. They just are selling you the drugs you make inside your body, but Zuckerberg is a drug dealer. And so when we recognize all that, well, what's the harm of not thinking anymore? Well, not thinking means that we don't process our lives anymore. We don't self-evaluate the same way anymore. I mean, this whole Karen movement, the Karen and Kevin or Karen and Ken or whatever, the memes, like fully grown adults having completely emotional meltdowns that are just completely unacceptable. Two causes, as far as I'm concerned, two primary causes and other influences. But the one cause is there's no more self-reflection. Everybody's just, looking at their device and they don't get to self-reflect on their behavior anymore. But here's another reason, and this is a big principle of personal development and parenting development. Any behavior that is rewarded is likely to be repeated. So if you see a 38-year-old woman having a Karen style meltdown at the bus stop, I can tell you right now, her parents gave her what she wanted when she had a temper tantrum. That's what happened, right? So between those two influences, now you've got people out there that are just difficult to be around. And that's, again, it's because we're not taking contemplation time. We don't sit. In the old days, you'd have dinner with your friends, and then you would think a lot about the things you said and the things they said, and you think, maybe I shouldn't have told that joke, or maybe I shouldn't have said that thing.
Right.
And your personal development was happening constantly. Now you're just looking at cute kittens on Instagram. So meditation and journaling are a big part of those things. And I'll share one thing about meditation. I started meditating at the age of 12 by accident. I was watching an episode of The $6 Million Man, and there was a guy on the show that could hold his breath as long as he held an image of this calm lake, and they shot it really well. And I remember, so I just started doing that meditation at 12. Whenever I was in a stressful situation, or whenever I had to wait, or I was bored, or whenever my teacher couldn't hold my attention, I would just go to that lake, and I changed a little bit. I would paddle across the lake, trying not to create any ripples in my meditations. And I've been doing that since I was 12. And so then I got into exploring meditation, and I can tell you that it is absolutely paramount to my quality of life, but I can give one clear, quick example. Right. My first business was facing implosion. I believed I was going to go out of business. We were profitable, but we'd run out of money, and I'd mismanaged somehow, and money wasn't coming in. And I woke up on a Monday, and my accountant told me that we couldn't make payroll or anything on Friday. And we were going to go out of business. And I knew that I didn't see a way out. And that morning I prayed, and my version of spirituality doesn't really involve asking somebody else to fix my problems, but I prayed anyway. And what I prayed for was a nervous breakdown. I asked for one. I was like, I just want to lose it all. I just want a nervous breakdown, because this is inevitable, and my ego is on the line. And so the best thing, and my previous boss had a nervous breakdown, and so I knew what they were. He'd had a nervous breakdown, and everybody had sympathy for him. That's why his business went down, because he had this nervous breakdown. So I was like, okay, a nervous breakdown, perfect. That's what I want, please. Downloading, come on, download the nervous breakdown, but it wasn't available from the App Store. I couldn't download the nervous breakdown. It wouldn't come. And so I was sitting, and I was going to get in the bath, and I grabbed a book, an audiobook, and the audiobook was, there's a spiritual, you mentioned Wayne Dyer right at the start of our talk. There's a spiritual solution to every problem. Mm-hmm. And in the audiobook, Wayne is telling the story, and Wayne's like, I was really going through some hard times. I was really struggling. And you know, Wayne, he spoke slowly. He's like, I was really struggling with something, and I just needed to talk it out with a friend. So I picked up the phone and I called Deepak, and I said, Deepak answered, hello. And he answered, and he goes, and I said, Deepak, I'm really struggling and I just need to talk. Meditate. No, I know to meditate. I know to meditate, but these things are just too much, and life is so, meditate. I know I'm Wayne Dyer. I'm Dyer Wayne. You know, I write about I know about meditating. It's just that right now I just feel like I need to meditate and call me back. And then Wayne says he went off and meditated, and then he never called Deepak back about that thing. It's like and I listened to that and I laughed my butt off, and then I meditated. And then I remembered one of the most important things ever, and that is the least motivated you are to meditate, the more you probably need to. Mm. The more you don't want to meditate, the more you probably need to.
That's that should be a t-shirt. That should be a t-shirt. Now, during, in our lives, as we were walking, and we got that little voice in our head who's, he or she is not the nicest all the time, that negative talk, the monkey brain, as they say in the meditating circles. How do you quiet that negative talk? Because I have to imagine you've got that monkey inside your head too, saying, Eric, you really shouldn't start this new business. Who do you think you are? Oh, you're not going to go on stage with Tony Robbins. Like, what are you thinking? That kind of stuff. How did you silence that to be able to get to where you got to go?
Yeah, that's a tough one. There's a lot to unpack there. I think I can focus on two solutions that I use quite a lot. One is align and redirect. And so funny you mentioned the Tony Robbins thing. When I said yes to Tony, when I said yes to go to Fiji, it wasn't really the smartest thing I'd ever done if you think it through. It turned out to be, but if you think it through, I hadn't been on stage for 3 years. I'd been running a movie studio. I wasn't a speaker. I didn't know how to do, I didn't know what I was doing. And so in a sense, it was almost like I was a go-kart driver and somebody just said, could you just fill in for my Formula One driver today? And I said yes to that. And so I found myself having a great deal of self-doubt and stuff. And I'm on the plane and I'm having all this self-doubt, and I'm thinking, I'm just going to make a fool of myself, and I'm going to make a fool of myself in front of somebody that I admire a great deal, who's done a great deal for me. And I found all this happening. And then I thought, wait a second, wait a second. How do you want it to be? And so I started thinking about how I wanted it to be. And I was like, I want to do really well. And I've been working on it. And I am a business owner, and I know what I'm talking about. And when I have spoken about stuff, it's gone really well. So why would I second guess this? And is second guessing this going to help? And I just start coaching myself. And so at one point, I'm literally like, I feel like I'm two people having this conversation. And at one point, finally, the negative part of me relents, and he goes, okay, you're right. We got to do this. We got to do this thing. In fact, that's it. If we do well enough, maybe we can even get on the list. Maybe we can even get on the list that Tony would call us again if he ever had a problem. And the other me said, no, we don't want to get on the list. We want to be the list. And somehow I'd gone from freaking out to touching down in Fiji and knowing that I was playing a bigger game. And it's really important because after that process on the plane, I recreated the entire talk. Because it wasn't at standard yet. And so that's something we need to know, is that very often when we're having that negative talk, it's because there's something we need to do. There's something not right yet. And your mind is just trying to get you to find that thing. I went in and there was this one story I was planning to tell at about an hour, but I realized, no, for this audience, I got to bring it to the front. I can get Tony's engagement that way. And I brought it to the front. And it changed everything. That, by the way, Tony, they told me he would only stay for 15 minutes. And as long as he was happy, he would leave. And he stayed for 3.5 hours laughing and enjoying it. And every second sentence was in Chinese. So it wasn't even the easiest presentation in the world. So that coaching the self-talk thing is a big thing. What would a coach say to you in that situation? And possibility thinking, getting clear about how you want it to be. How do you want it to be? Remember, your negative mind is going, what if it does go like this? What if it does go like this? But your other mind can be going, yeah, but I want it to go like this. I want it to go like this. And that, for me, that works. But there's an even more powerful version. It's a little dangerous, but it's really powerful. And that is something that I call rock bottom perspective. And it's based on something I mentioned to you earlier. And that is that sometimes rock bottom is the thing that people need to turn their lives around. Mm-hmm. But the trouble with rock bottom is that it's frankly dangerous. Some people don't survive rock bottom, literally. Some people lose everything, including their lives. So what do we want to do? Do we want to hit rock bottom or not? And so one of the things that I do is I do exercises with clients when I'm in my workshops and stuff, where I will take somebody who's scared about something, and rather than try to reframe them and motivate them and inspire them, I'll go, well, how bad could it go? I mean, how bad could it be? Tell me the truth. You lose your job. Then what? You lose your house. Do you have any savings? No, you're gonna lose the house too. So you're going to go through personal bankruptcy. How bad is that going to be? And I just play it all out. And then what everybody finds out is that they're going to turn it around. They're gonna turn around. Now, there are some exceptions to this. There are some exceptions when somebody's dealing with really serious, say, alcohol or drug addiction or what have you, but then the exercise works another way. It only ever goes one of two ways. One is they realize that things were never going to be as bad as they thought they were going to be. That's 99%. We worry about shit that's never going to happen and never going to be as bad as we thought. Why? Pessimism is safer than optimism. That's why. That's it. But the every now and again, the rock bottom is that bad. It really is that bad. But why not go visit it now? Like, why not go see it now? Why not? And by the way, you'll often hear this with, say, alcoholism, where say the husband has an alcohol problem. What is the wife doing? Hiding the alcohol, waking him up so that he's not late for work, covering for him when he's inexcusably rude at a dinner. Stop doing that shit. Don't hide the alcohol. Buy him more. Don't wake him up. Let him get fired from his job. Now, I realize these are tough things to say, and sure, you're living in it. But every time you soften the landing, you're moving rock bottom further away. And what this person might need is actual rock bottom. But better than that is, what if they could associate to rock bottom without ever getting there? What if they could? And so I've had both experiences in my life. There was something going on in my life, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I was like kind of stressing about it. And I dove in and I realized I was right to be stressing. I was absolutely right to be stressing about it. And I had to do something about it. I had somebody working with me that I knew was stealing from me, that I knew was overcharging me, that I knew was misrepresenting things, and that I liked a great deal. But I just knew this in my heart, and I'd question it, and I would get all these confused, bubbly answers, the kind, the double talk, but we're doing the math, that kind of stuff, and, right. And I one day went out and projected into my future and saw where it was going. And it was painful. It was the end. It was really bad. And it was only by projecting my consciousness out in the future that I was able to, what would I do if everything went that bad? I would finally take action. Well, then I better take action now. So sometimes you push your consciousness out and you experience the rock bottom, but then other times you push your consciousness out and you realize the rock bottom was never going to be that bad. And I had this when I had my movie studio in California. I bought it and immediately found out the guys who sold it to me had defrauded me, lied to me, cheated me, and it looked like I was going to lose everything. And for many months, every single week, I'd be worried about losing the studio. Every week, payroll was a difficulty, worker comp was a difficulty, union things were a difficulty. Every week, I faced the reality of losing everything and everybody losing their jobs. And one day, I was like, I can't live like this anymore. So how bad would this be? And I sat with my wife and we talked about it. And I said, well, what's the worst thing that happens? We lose everything. Okay. We lose everything we've invested in this. Well, we still own our house. Okay. Mortgaged, right? But we still own our house. She still had her accountancy practice, which was part-time, but it was enough since we had the house and, we could just barely squeak by, which means we weren't going to end up in like personal bankruptcy. And then we're like, yeah, which means, frankly, I could just take a couple of months off. I mean, we'd be skinny about it. We wouldn't be going out for meals and stuff, but I could take a couple of months off and recalibrate my life. And then I'd find the next thing. And all of a sudden we realized it wasn't that bad if it happened. And then here's where the real magic was. You're like, I almost hope this does happen. By the way, the minute that we found that, We won a major contract to do the movie Elysium with the Matt Damon movie.
Of course,
Neil
yeah.
Blomkamp. We then won Iron Man, and then we won Pirates of the Caribbean 3. We then entered the only profitable trading period in the history of the company, even before I bought it. We turned things, it was phenomenal. And you can get into the esoteric conversation. Did that happen because I changed my vibration? Is it because we suddenly were happier and we were enjoying our lives again that we attracted these things? If you watch The Secret, you might say yes. I say, who knows? But what I do know is that I got to enjoy the time more. That's my main issue.
So you were happier doing the thing where before you were terrified.
Yeah. Now it was just a video game. I'm like, okay, it's difficult and it's challenging, but it's a game.
Well, then that's the thing. That's one of the reasons why gamers go into the boss level all in and they strap themselves in, because they know there's no real danger. So they just go all in.
Okay. But that's interesting. Hold on. You're onto something here. And this is a real human challenge we're all going to have to face very soon. First of all, when the gamers are done playing all of Halo, when they finished it all, what do? They go to insane level. They upstage the level and play it again harder.
Yeah.
That's how life should be. That's how we should be doing it. You play it harder every time. Now let me ask you a question. You're an original gamer. You remember Pac-Man, right? Then you watch Pac-Man to Asteroids to Dragon Slayer to whatever. The games have been getting increasingly more realistic every single day. And we are at best 5 years away from video games that are indecipherable from your real life experience. Mm-hmm. We're talking about virtual reality that stimulates your neurology. So
the holodeck.
That you feel the things you touch. It's
the holodeck. Right? Yeah, the holodeck.
Yeah,
sure.
Exactly. So now let me ask you a question. Alex, you have an opportunity to do a halo jump out of a plane. You have an opportunity to do a halo jump out of the plane. It's a simulation. And what's going to happen is your primary chute isn't going to open. And you're going to be free falling. And you're going to have a long extended free fall. You're going to feel the wind in your hair. It's going to be amazing. Now you'll know you're in a sim. You'll know you're in a sim, but you're going to feel it all. And then at the last minute, your backup chute is going to pop and you're going to land on the ground. And that's how it's going to be. Would you want to do this sim?
Before I answer that, as you were saying it, I felt myself getting scared and nervous. Yeah. As you were talking about it, I started to feel like certain chemicals were starting to get released inside my own mind.
Yep.
As you were just talking about it. That's how powerful the story that you were creating in my mind was. And I was like, and my voice was like, dude, he's just talking about it. You're not going to jump. You're not this or that. So would I do it? I would say yes, but it's a sim, but then we're going to start getting into the conversation of the Matrix.
Hang on. Well, that is where we're going. The next question is, you've now done that jump 2 or 3 times knowing it's a sim and you're now bored with it.
Of course.
Now I tell you, hey, Alex, I didn't mention this to you earlier, but we have a version of the game that is indecipherable from real life. It's indecipherable from real life. So you will not know you're in the game. So you will actually think it's real. And you won't know whether your emergency chute is going to open. It's going to be real. You've done it the boring way. Would you like to feel it for real life? Would you like to feel it for real life?
After knowing that, but I won't know it when I'm in it.
You know it now, but you won't know it when you're in it, to make it very real.
Ooh. Yeah, of course I would do it. Why? Because you know instinctively that you're safe. Which, but now
when you're in it, you won't.
And when you're in it, you won't. But knowing the information that I know now, even while I'm experiencing it, I might be disconnected from the reality of what's going on, but I want to give myself that experience. Now, This is a wonderful analogy to the soul body connection.
Yep.
It was such a wonderful analogy to it, because as the soul, if you want to go into in the world of that conversation, you're a soul and someone's telling you, a guide or somebody's going, okay, you want to go back down to earth. You want to learn some lessons. Okay. You're going to jump out of some planes. This is going to happen. You're going to do this. Your heart's going to break. You're going to be one of the richest people in the world. And you're going to lose it all, only to have to rebuild it again. And you're going to learn all of this stuff, but you won't know that this is a simulation. You won't know that this is not real. This is part of just a school that you're going to learn these lessons. Do you want to go? And as the soul goes, I'm a soul, I'm eternal. Nothing could happen to me. Let's go.
Yep.
And if you think about your life that way, which is hard for a lot of people, but that simulation idea, man, that's such a wonderful analogy to it.
It's how it is. And I look at that and go, if you want to take the extension a little further, and I think Elon Musk has made some comment like this. I can't say it's partly original thought, but it's definitely been influenced by what's going on in the world and what other people have said. But consider this. If you ask the question of whether or not we have humans on the rest of the planet, life on other planets, you have to assume that Earth is in the middle of that bell curve. And that means that there are planets that have unicellular protozoa on them somewhere out there in the universe, but that there are also planets that have had a life for billions and billions of years that are so far advanced beyond us. And if we're only 5 years out from fully integrated, complete illusion sim, then that means there are already societies that have that, which means you and I right now are living in a sim written by some 13-year-old acne-faced kid, and we call them God.
And there's that conversation as well. No, you start, man, your head will start hurting. If you start going down this train of thought, your head will start hurting.
Well, I only do those thought processes because what I'm really trying to do is I'm trying to say, we really don't know. We don't know what's next. We don't know what was before. What we know is now. And the truth of the matter is, the more we can enjoy the now, the better. And that means enjoy the easy stuff, but it also means enjoy the tough stuff. I've climbed Kilimanjaro 7 times. The person who is entirely focused on the summit doesn't often make it to the summit. The person who finds to enjoy every step, every conversation, every lichen, every view, if they focus on that, they get to the summit.
That's amazing. I'm going to ask you a couple questions, ask all my guests, Eric. What do you believe is your mission in this life?
So missions and purpose are a little different. I think purpose is really to enjoy it. And then missions are things like completing the game metaphor. Missions are like quests that we undertake at various stages of our lives. And so my current mission really is it's to, through having a great deal of fun, improve the quality of people's lives in a variety of ways. The 3 gifts that I gave myself as a young man, one was a level of economic stability and freedom by figuring out entrepreneurship. The second one was comfort and confidence with public speaking, which I was so terrified of before. And then the third one was a healthy body through a great relationship with food, exercise, hydration, what have you. And so my mission in life is to give those gifts to billions of people. And that's what I do every day.
And what do you believe is the ultimate purpose of life?
Enjoy it. Enjoy it thick and thin. Life is always and consistently happening for you, not to you, especially when it doesn't feel that way.
That's very true. I mean, you're just throwing out t-shirts left and right, my friend. I mean, you start a t-shirt company with these things. I'm just saying. And where can people find out more about the work you're doing, Eric?
Well, I manage my own Instagram account, so that's probably the best place to just come out and reach me. But if people are interested in food, what we call food freedom, like having a great relationship with food, then getwildfit.com. For people who are interested in self-employment or entrepreneurship and want to figure out how to build a business that improves your quality of life, then businessfreedom.com. And people who are interested in influence, public speaking, presentations, that sort of stuff, whether for business or political or social campaigns or what have you, then you want to become comfortable and confident with public speaking, then check out speakernation.com.
Eric, it has been an honor and a privilege talking to you, my friend. It was so much fun talking to a fellow old school gamer and using these wonderful analogies. So I really do appreciate you, my friend. Thank you for everything that you do with your work and for the world in general. So I appreciate you, my friend.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue your journey, and don't forget to subscribe.